Welcome to the Valley Queens podcast. Thank you so much for coming. We have here a team from the National Parent Teacher Association. And with us, we have a member of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, Jo Bracken. Say hi.
Hi.
We also have Dr. Sylvia Reyna, the chair of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee.
Hi, how are you?
And finally, but not least, we have the president-elect of the National PTA, Anna King.
Hi.
Thank you guys so much for coming. And we're basically getting together tonight to discuss the intersection between the Parent Teacher Association and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And basically, I want to start out, and I just want you guys to respond. Whoever wants to respond can respond. Or if I have a directed question, I'll ask you directly. But either way, it's open forum. Okay. So the question here is, what does the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee at the National PTA do?
Do you want me to take that one? Let me, as the chairperson, I'll go ahead and take that one. But what we've been charged to do is to create those kinds of the language and also the resource material so that our members fully understand what diversity, equity, and inclusion are. We have a common so that we have a common language, and that we also create the material so that when they take this out to their states or their local PTAs, that they have the materials to help them guide their members through understanding what it is, and then how to do something about it, how to take action regarding the topic. And so that's really what we've done over the last year and a half, is to create the definitions, first formulate our belief statements as an entire national PTA, formulate the belief statements, also then the definitions to have that common language, and then to create the resource material so that local PTAs can use them to advance that agenda.
So that's interesting, because you said first you had to create the positions, and I know that last year, it was last year. Wow. After the George Floyd murder, the National PTA sent out a position statement on specifically systemic racism, which I think was very bold, because a lot of the institutions haven't sort of acknowledged or graduated to facing the idea of systemic racism, and they just keep the definitions of racism to the interpersonal level. So what was it that prompted this? What was your goal with this position statement?
Do you want to take that one, Anna?
Sure.
I know that, yeah.
It was extremely important that we take that position on something that is affecting so many of our families and so many of our communities. Our tagline is actually speak up for every child with one voice. And so we recognized that we couldn't fulfill our tagline if we didn't use our voice to advocate for every child, regardless of who they were or where they came from. And our children of color are directly and indirectly affected by racism every day. And it was important for us to address the issue and bring the attention to our members and our leaders. And that is our responsibility when we say we advocate for every child, that we advocate for every child.
Okay. So it's sort of like the idea, do you believe that acknowledging and then addressing racism issues on a national level through a systemic lens, do you come up with systemic solutions or systemic strategies, or do you do like a sort of like interpersonal spectrum and then all the way to systemic? Does that make sense?
So we had to bring the awareness first, right? That was it. That was us taking a stand. We had to bring it to the forefront. And if you've read that position statement, it tells us that there are 3 things that we encourage our leaders and our members to do. First, to listen. You have to listen to understand what racism is in our different communities and from our families that are facing this every day. And then you have to educate yourself. And educating yourself is by talking to different groups in the different communities that are facing these situations. Educate yourself on the system of how it's created for people if it's unjust. And then to use your voice by advocating, by doing the right thing. And so with those three things, we encouraged our members and our local leaders and our states and everybody to get involved with those three things. It's important that you do them all. You can't just take one and just listen and say, oh, okay, I listened to them. You need to educate yourself on the issues, and then that's how you will be an effective leader, by advocating.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that sounds great. I know that Candy has been sort of addressing the awareness and education part. I know you've been posting every day on social media biographies and information on figures for Black History Month. You did on African American and Black people information, and this month was Women's History Month, and you've been making us aware and educating us on very influential figures in terms of women. Can you explain a little bit more as to why you're doing that and what your goal is?
So our diversity committee decided that we wanted to focus each month on one topic. Typically it'll fall into the national observance each month, or we'll go with our Every Child in Focus, that group that we used to have at PTA. But our point in all this is to spread out the knowledge of different people, things that people have done throughout our history. And because when we look at each one of our PTAs and each one of our communities, diversity looks different because our communities are each different. So while one group may be exposed to a certain group of people because that's what their community is like, they may not know what's happening in another location. I'm from Alaska, so I use this a lot. What happens in New York City or California, they don't recognize what happens in our villages up here, because our diversity is much, much different in our villages than it is even in Anchorage. So the point of this is to get the education out there, get the knowledge out there, and make sure that everybody is exposed to all different types of diversity and learn about our history in different ways. Every time we get a conversation going on the Facebook page of one of these posts, it's always a good conversation. And very rarely have we gotten where somebody doesn't want to listen. Everybody wants to learn, and it is amazing the conversations that get going, the friendships that are started, and the diversity that we're seeing at the local levels and even at the state levels, how people are growing.
Okay, so that was my next follow-up question. What kind of like obstacles or barriers have you found in the past year after pushing out the position statement?
Well, I think I was just going to say that I think that some of the barriers that we've encountered are just misunderstandings by and large. That's why it really compelled us to have that common language. So when we say diversity, what do we mean? We mean more than ethnic and racial diversity or gender diversity. We mean diversity in all spectrums, and we give examples of that. And so we also then had to have a common language. So what does it mean to be inclusive? That sense of safe harbor and welcomingness and belonging to the space that they're invited into, or that we invite those people into spaces such that they can feel welcome. But also then, what is equity? Because equity has a different definition in a lot of areas and with a lot of individuals. So for National PTA to adopt our belief statements, and then our language, our common understandings, that really has helped kind of take down some of the barriers that we saw existed before. And some of those very much so were just the misunderstandings. People getting a little defensive about, well, what does that mean? I don't understand. Well, I'm not a racist. Oh yes, you are, because you don't believe it. Those kinds of conversations are allayed when you have a common understanding of what everyone is talking about. And so that really was the kind of approach that we took to bring that kind of understanding to people.
Okay. So that's good. Creating a dialogue in which everyone starts from the same place, same
Exactly.
definitions. We're talking about the same exact things. So my question is, what can you provide, for example, a PTA leader in a small community, or even in a big community, in a city, an urban area, when they say, oh, I want to engage in diversity and equity and inclusion work, but I just don't know where to start. We've never done this before. Like what, I mean, it seems overwhelming for a lot of people.
It is hugely, it is just overwhelming, that is the title. To even start at this, where to start, we actually came up with a PTA local leader guidance for diversity, equity, and inclusion packet. It's a how-to. It's how to determine where you're at in the stage, where you need to be, and how to get there. And then also at our legislative convention, we held a few webinars that were able to expand a little bit on those topics. Our upcoming convention, we're going to have quite a few more. And then just talking back and forth and talking with other groups and finding out what they're doing, especially in your individual communities, because like we've said, diversity is different everywhere. So working within your community and finding out where others are at also helps gauge where you're at and where you need to be.
No, then that's helpful. And I'm going to put the link right on the bottom of this, of this podcast, so that people can access it really easily. So what if you have somebody who's just a parent in the PTA, a member, right? Or even somebody who's not a member, right? And they're like, I want to be active in my school community. I want to join the PTA, but I don't feel like the leadership is open to diversity, equity, inclusion work. What would you tell them? What would be the advice?
Sylvia, you want to take this, or Kenny, Jo, you want me to?
Go for it.
Go for it, Anna.
I was one of those parents.
Oh, really?
To be honest, yeah, I was. I didn't feel when I first got involved in PTA, I didn't feel like, because I'm from a big urban district, I didn't feel like I understood PTA to the extent where I do now, and the work that we are doing now. But that's how I felt. I felt like, you can't speak for me. You don't know anything about my community or the things that we're facing. And I educated myself. I got online. I went to the PTA website. I looked at everything, especially when it came to how we could help our kids inside of our school. I empowered myself. Then in return, after I empowered myself, I engaged other people to say, did you know that PTA did this? Did you know that they did this? Who knew that they had everything to do with kindergarten and free hot meals in schools and immunizations? Who knew that? And did you know that when we were fighting for school books inside of our school, this is what they've been doing for 100 years? So it was really simple. And now that we have these, right, you can Google it. You can get on the website and just check it out. And then after you check it out, go to your state PTA. Get to know who your state leaders are. Tell them that you want to get involved and engage. And how can I help? And how can you help me empower myself to be a better advocate for my kids?
Okay. So apparently that's a common theme. It's all starting with awareness and education. And
Very much so.
so that makes sense. So since you've began like I don't want to say prioritizing, but like spotlighting advocacy and diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Have you done some soul searching within the own organization itself?
Absolutely. Go ahead,
Absolutely.
Sylvia.
I was going to say absolutely, because you cannot, I mean, you have to look within to understand, and you have to also then be able to promote outside. But we looked within the association to see where our gaps were and how to address those gaps. And again, it kind of dictated the way that we approached how we were going to reignite diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because don't misunderstand, these are not new topics to PTA. These, PTA advocates have been in existence for many, many years and have taken the banner of advocating for every child very seriously. And so that obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion has been in our history. But what we also said is that we needed to reignite that because of the current times we're in, and it just called for bringing that to the forefront. So looking internally, were we living our mission internally? Because how can we expect others to follow if we are not examining ourselves and addressing the inequities that we see within the association? So that really was the posture, and very open about it. I think all of us, that because all of us are also on the national board, we had great conversations about it. We took positions about it. We voted unanimously to accept the definitions and the belief statements and then everyone committed 100% to addressing the issues. And so I think that you're going to see that reignition of the topic is took place when we began also with just examining ourselves internally.
Okay.
And
so
this year too, we did our board just passed a 5-year strategic plan that is heavily engaged with our DEI work.
Has a DEI lens,
Absolutely, all through it.
For everything we do.
And I just want to add in there too that we started this work in 2019 when we went in depth into how National PTA was addressing the diversity and inclusion. And along with that, last year in 2020 was our 50th anniversary of our unification from the National Congress of Colored Parents and Teachers and National Congress of Parents and Teachers. So we used that in order to help with our lessons and our trainings with race relations.
Story.
PTA.
Very much so.
So
it's been engaged way before 2019 though. We're constantly talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion ever since we became one PTA with our merge, and like Candy Jo said, our unification in June of 1970.
So yeah, that was my follow-up question. My follow-up question is, you've been engaging in this, and I've seen it in a very optic way. It's very visible, all the work you guys are doing in the National PTA to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I guess that's what was my question was, so what are the next steps? How are we evolving this conversation? How are we elevating the conversation now that we have the definitions and we have a foundation of education? What is next, I guess, for the PTA?
Well, for me, as the chair of the committee, is to continue to develop the resources that people need, because they might have they might be lacking in information. And how is it that I translate this to my local PTA? So for us, it's about creating more material so that they can use those as resources. If you think about this, we cannot, and as Anna said, we cannot pledge or have as our primary focus and mission to advocate for all children if we really are not representing all children, all families, making sure that they are welcome in every setting, whether it's a school or whether it's in government, et cetera, and that they're going to be treated equitably, which means that sometimes they're going to get more because they need more and the resources are there that they need more. So we have to continuously work on reinforcing the definitions, but then providing all of those materials that support that so that they're not left empty-handed. So from a very practical point of view, that's next on our agenda, and we're in the process of creating a field guidebook that literally is going to talk about how is it that you engage members, but with a DEI lens? How is it that you create programs and provide programs to your constituencies with a DEI lens? How is it that you advocate for what children need and what is in the best interest of children and their families, but with a DEI lens? And then how is it that you govern your PTA and demonstrate leadership through that DEI lens? That's our framework. And so we're going to be moving forward with that.
And I think
leadership development too, leadership development
Leadership.
with the DEI lens,
Mhm.
and continuing to having tough conversations,
Very.
to be honest, and to be willing to listen.
So I mean, I know you guys understand that this is a lot of work, obviously. And it's especially for a lot of like community PTA groups who have never heard of this because their communities are perhaps not racially diverse, but they don't recognize that there's different types of diversity as well. Socioeconomic, LGBTQ+, etc. So I guess my question is now, you're providing the resources. Do all the PTAs have to do this? Or can they just say no, we're just not going to deal with that? Can they opt out of it? Or is there regulations, not even regulations, you said guidelines. Do they have to abide by these guidelines?
So Sylvia, do you want to answer it?
No, I was going to say, go Anna, you're
so
president-elect.
So our states, we have something called standards of affiliation, where each one of our states, we ask our states to come up with a diversity plan of how they're going to do the work within their states, and it trickles down all the way down to their local units. Each state is different in how they do that. Sometimes they have a committee, sometimes they have a chair, sometimes they have a different event, sometimes they have a conference on how they do that. The requirements go to the states of what they ask of their local units. But here's the thing. If you are a member of PTA, and our tagline is every child, one voice. It might not affect your community, but it's affecting the kids in your schools. It's affecting the kids outside of your school district, even in your community. Because sometimes when we think about diversity, we think of race. That's the very first thing when we're talking about diversity, right? Well, that doesn't affect us. We don't have this culture here. But there are so many missing pieces of it, that it does affect you in one way or another. And you should want to be involved. You should want to be engaged. And I can't see any of our local PTA saying, no, we don't do that, because they're in the schools doing the work for kids. And the kids inside of the schools come from the communities that are going through these things. So they're already doing the work. And for them to not think that they are, just because they might not see a plethora of a rainbow, it doesn't mean it's just color. You're doing the work already in the schools, in the community. And so by doing that, you're being inclusive, you're being intentional, and just thinking about diversity in the different spec of how we view it is what's needed. So our states are doing the work, and so it trickles down to the local units. And I'm hoping that all of our local units take heed and get involved with it more so now, because the demographics of our school districts and our communities are slowly changing, but slowly. And 10 years from now, they won't look the same as they did 10 years ago. And so we either going to be part of the problem or we're going to be part of the solution. And we want to be a part of the solution up front.
So I think you mentioned something very interesting, which is the idea of like, we think of our communities as sort of like, sometimes we think of them as isolated. You know, it's like, this is our community, this is our school community. But also you touched on the idea that it also affects outside of what we believe is the school, PTA. Like it affects the district, our neighbors that may not get to go to the different schools. Are you guys working with or partnering with other organizations to push this through?
We're all shaking our
Yes.
heads because we know that you cannot do anything in isolation. You cannot do anything by yourself. Though we're a very large organization and represent a variety of individuals and have a number of members, you've got to have other partner entities, agencies, professional associations, like-minded nonprofits, et cetera, joining together to carry the message forth. Because bottom line, it's about the best interest of children and their families. And so who doesn't want that? The measure of a quality society is really those who take care of those most vulnerable, and those are your children. And that's what, we have to all join together to do. So when you talk about the teacher associations, the administrator associations, so that's the educational world, but then you've got the nonprofit world. You have the business community that has also joined in to say, DEI makes for better production in my business, makes for this XYZ. We want a prepared workforce. Let's all join together because, again, bottom line, it's all for the benefit of children. And so, do we have a number? Yes. I mean, we're blessed to have that. But again, the conversation is always going on, and refining it, and defining and refining.
So it seems that you guys are focused on evolving always and progressing.
Always.
That it's not just like, oh, we hit our goals, we're set, we're cool.
You have to attend one of our board meetings to know that is not our position. We are constantly in conversation about how to improve things, and we are never satisfied with the status quo. And we've often said, you've got to be a little uncomfortable to make things happen. And God bless John Lewis and Dr. Martin Luther King for having established that position with all of us, in that we do have to get a little uncomfortable, but to create our beloved communities. And that's really what we're about, is creating those beloved communities for all of our children and our families.
So I want to go back to, you said that you guys had a 5-year strategic plan and that you wanted to provide more resources for the states and to trickle down to kind of local PTAs. And for the National PTA organization itself, do you have any goals that you're like, we haven't achieved this yet, but we're trying to move towards it? And also, if you do, which I'm sure you do, how can the local PTAs and the state PTAs and just parents like myself who are members, how can we help do that?
Sylvia, you want to take it?
No, I've already taken quite a bit. Y'all go.
Candy, do you want to take it?
Go ahead. I have a lot of noise back here right now.
Oh, okay. So yes, it is focus. We have 3 pillars, right? We just approved it. So it is a working plan right now where we are building it to get it out to the members. And there's a lot of focus on there about leadership development, on how we build community awareness, build effective leaders to not only just to understand DEI, but to be able to lead a conversation regarding the DEI work. A local member or a parent can go to our website at any time and say, I want to get involved. Anytime. You just pta.org, click on, and you'll see everything that we have to offer. From podcasts, we have different podcasts called Notes from Backpack, where you can learn from there. You can drive in the car for 15 minutes and hear about different topics that are affecting our parents. And this past year was very interesting because we focused a whole lot on mental health and COVID. And so, in teacher engagement, teacher involvement, where we had professionals come and give us information of how to be a successful parent inside of the school. Not only the podcast, but we have e-learning courses that will help you. We have a monthly Our Voice magazine that comes out. There are so many different resources. And if you don't want to do it on a national level, go to your state PTAs. Every state has a state PTA, a state website.
Oh, she got frozen a little bit.
But
Know
I know
how,
she was,
but I
I
wanna
know
get
she was,
involved.
oh, there you go.
Yeah.
You were frozen a moment.
Oh, okay, my bad. My bad. I'm sorry.
But
I hope
no,
I was making it. I hope I was making a cute face though. You know,
You
sometimes.
were.
Okay.
So because I'm asking because a lot of parents may feel a little bit overwhelmed or a little bit threatened by like, oh my God, it's like a whole culture. It's a lot of, for example, bylaws and systems and processes. And they're like, I don't know. I don't know where to start.
so true.
There is
Ca-
so much.
Candy Joe.
Yeah, this is you, Ken.
So there is so much out there that local leaders have to do, and coming in, it does look overwhelming. But if you take it one step at a time, and if you're starting at the local level and you look for the leader that can handle each part, everybody has a specialty.
Mm.
We want our leaders, we want our members to fill their spot where they feel comfortable. So just because we have a bylaws that need to be followed doesn't mean that it's something too big to take over. You take one little piece and the next person takes another little piece and another person takes the next little, and by the time you have all those parts and pieces filled, you have not only a diverse board, you have a diverse membership, you have a membership that is fully engaged in the children in that school, in that community. Because it's not just it's like we've been saying, it's not just your school, it's a community now. What happens in that school, especially now that we're not in school, we're at home, it's affecting our community, it's affecting our businesses, it's affecting families in the homes without children in school. So you have now a wider range of people that you can bring into your PTA as a local leader, as a local member, to help with those other things that might be scary to one person, but maybe just exactly what another person wants to do. And our PTAs don't have to be a person with a child in that school or a person with a child in that community. It can be anybody. So that makes it so that you don't have to be so worried about you having to fill that spot you know nothing about.
Okay, that makes
Absolutely.
sense. So you're saying that the PTAs, even the local PTAs, have a lot of autonomy to sort of tailor and mold their PTA according to their community, the representation of the community, but also what their community has to offer.
They should.
Correct.
They should. That's what our mission is. Our mission is to engage and empower everyone in the community and our families to advocate for every child. So the community is the school. I remember growing up where it said, and it still is, it takes a village to raise a child. It's not just the school. It's the community wraps its arms around it, and you want to involve the community because they can create resources, provide volunteers so parents don't get burned out on doing different events, or give you different topics to talk about inside of your school. You have different health organizations that will come in. There's so much that we could do to provide for our families inside of our schools if we think outside the box. And as Candy Jo said, find different people who have skills that can bring to the table to make it a better PTA or PTSA, because we have a Parent Teacher Student Association as well.
So here's the so I reached out to my community and I asked them, what would you ask the National PTA leaders if you could ask them anything,
Oh
right?
boy. Okay.
And one of the things that I heard a lot of parents talk about is how can we attract more men, more dads? Because the PTA, since its inception, has been very mother-centered because understandably, back in the day, it was
Sure.
sort of like the norm in middle-class America in which the mom stayed at home and the dad went to work full-time. But now that's not the norm anymore. So how do we attract more dads, more grandparents, more male figures into the PTA?
So so at our elementary PTA, we held an event one night that was activities. And we actually, unfortunately, couldn't get very many moms to show up. There was a couple, they did like knitting and they did a couple other little artsy stuff. But we had 3 dads show up. One who was doing drawing, another one who was putting together some model cars. And then I don't remember, I think the third dad was doing some kind of science projects. But those 3 tables were fully filled with the kids. Felt sorry for the moms because they had 1 or 2 people. Everybody else was at those tables with the dads. 3 dads then joined our PTA and became very integral in doing the extra projects that brought more dads in. So the big thing is to bring dads to something that interests them that's not a mom-driven activity. And then once you get a couple of them in, it starts to grow really fast when they see that there's other guys in there, other ones that might share some ideals and do things that they want to do with the kids. And it's amazing how much the kids just drift towards those dads. It's great to see that. And it's great to see the dads in our PTAs and taking over leadership in a lot of cases.
You know, I often say that we're in a relational business. I mean, we're about creating relationships with individuals, and hopefully that was meaningful relationships so that they're partnering with us side by side so that we can advocate for the child that we commonly know. And so when we talk about being purposeful and intentional and relational, it's about going out and asking individuals, you know, come join us, come join us. And if the target is more dads, or the target is, you know, some nurses to come help do this or whatever, be intentional, be purposeful, be relational, be welcoming, because no one wants to go where they're not welcome. And that's really what we're saying. This is the very core of what inclusivity is being, is setting the stage and then allowing individuals to come together in a safe place where they all feel welcome. And that's the guidance we give our leaders. And we say there's really no wrong way to do PTA. Come in and we will help you. We have all the rules and regulations that you're going to need. But you know what? It's there to guide you. There is absolutely no way to get involved in the best interest of children that's wrong. You know, and so we just provide the guidance for that. So I say be intentional, be purposeful, be relational, and be welcoming.
And ask
Okay.
them. Ask them to be a part of what you're doing. Have them sit at the table and get their input. That's what diversity and being inclusive is. It's having somebody at the table and hearing what they got to say. Sometimes as moms, what we fail to do is we use dads to bring in heavy stuff at events or different things like that, instead of being intentional, as Sylvia said.
So this also leads to the question of now there's different types of families. So it seems that you guys are saying there is space for any type of family in any sort of context, socioeconomic, whether it be lifestyle, anything. So basically there's a PTA, right. You can mold it. We'll provide you with resources and guidance. So I guess my last question is, before we go, for each one of you, if you needed parents in a community who are sort of like I don't know if I want to be in the PTA. It doesn't look like it's for me, or I don't feel welcomed, or they're a little bit reticent or even like overwhelmed by how much responsibility it may seem, what would you leave them with?
Andy, Joe, you want to go first?
I would leave them with the thought that it's not just one of us. That's what PTA is. PTA is all of us. We are all over the country, and we are here to help each other, and we're here to help every child. So it may be overwhelming and it may not seem exactly what you want, but give us a try, because we're all here and we're one big family, and we want everybody to succeed, the child, the parent, the community.
I would just say that I always ask individuals, what do they want for their children? And my gold standard is the very best for my child. And I want that standard for every child that I come in contact with. So I approach individuals and I say, what do you want for your child? Join us, because what we can provide are the numbers. We have large, we have a presence nationally. We have a presence in all states. We can advocate for those kinds of common issues that are in the best interest of children. So if you want to get engaged with that, if you want to, come join us, and we will make that environment pleasant. We will give you whatever you need to help you make sure that your child gets what your child needs. To me, that's the definition of equity, and just have that one-to-one conversation with an individual, and we're there for you to be able to have that with us.
Everything of what they just said, and to also say, every child needs an advocate. Every child needs somebody to speak in behalf of them. We have a lot of kids that don't have that. And so if you think it's scary,
Oh no, she got frozen again.
kids that are homeless. Did you, okay, can you hear me now?
You stopped at if you think it's scary, and then we got left in suspense.
Okay.
I'm like, oh no, what she's gonna say. It is. No.
If you think it's scary, think about the work that we've been doing for 124 years. Our work is about making sure that every child reaches its fullest potential. Every child. We want every child to be successful. We don't want any child left behind, no matter who they are or where they come from. And every child needs a voice. Even your kids. When we advocate as national leaders and as leaders of this association, we advocate in behalf of your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So join us at the table, because the louder our voices are, the louder people will hear us when we are talking about our children and how we want them to be successful with teachers and giving them the resources and school funding to make sure our schools are having the resources that they need to be successful all throughout the United States. This is about kids. Mm-hmm. Our kids need us, and they need all of us and all of our voices to be at the table when we are trying to make sure that they're successful by any means necessary. She brought up Martin Luther King and John Lewis, and I love them to death. And it's by any means necessary that we're going to get this work done, because it takes all of us. It doesn't just take a handful. A handful of us can it's kind of like throwing rocks in the water. You throw one pebble, it could just make a little ripple. But if you throw a huge rock, it goes shoo. And that's what we need. We need everybody at the table to be a part of our voice to make sure our kids have what they need.
And to create that beloved community that we all deserve.
Absolutely.
Well, that was great to hear. And also I want everybody to know that you guys are not just saying this, you are very accessible. Yes. So I was able to reach out to Candy, and she responded immediately, and I was like, what? I'm shocked. This is amazing. And then she invited you guys into this. So it does feel like it's a community. It doesn't feel like hierarchies. It feels like it's just a community. I can just reach out and just be like, hey, you know, Anna, I have this thing, this idea. What do you think about it? So parents can reach out by just visiting the pta.org website, right?
Yes, yes.
Which I will put on the link below, and all the resources materials that you guys discussed today. I want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And I hope that a lot of parents, and not even just parents, members of the community, because they're
Anybody.
also
That's right,
members
that's right.
of our school districts and our
Right.
schools, will watch this and think, hey, I have this very unique skill or tool in my toolbox that I can just add a little. And maybe when they start adding it a little, they're like, oh, I want to do a little bit more. And I want to do a
Right.
little bit more.
And that's
And
what
then all of a
happened.
sudden, and all of a sudden you're in the National PTA. What happened?
Right.
Yes.
'Cause, you know, some of us get involved. You just show up to a meeting and you leave, and the next day you're the president. So we need
You're in
everybody.
charge. Yeah.
We need
So true.
everybody at the table.
So
Yeah, and I
true,
want to
so true.
reiterate that it doesn't seem like it's a very strict hierarchy. So you can, you know, if you don't feel like you can contribute in a local level, but you want to contribute more in a state level, you can also
Mhm.
connect with them, or even connect to the national level.
Absolutely. This is a
Definitely.
family.
I just say that I started out as a treasurer at a local level, and 5 years later I was at national level. So it's very possible for anybody to step up if they want to, I mean, they may not even want to, and just find something that they love. I mean, it becomes part of you, because PTA is a life that, I mean, that's what we live.
It's not a hobby, it's a lifestyle.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
about our kids.
And I feel
'Cause
like
it's
you,
about children.
It's about
And
children.
and I know you talk about a lot about creating community, but for a lot of people, this might be also about feeling like you're at home somewhere and you're valued and you're useful. So I want to thank you so much for all the work you've been doing and you will do in the future. Yeah. And also me and
Yeah.
the parents, all the parents and the community members who want to become involved as well. And I can't think of anything else than to top the beautiful words you just told. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you so much for the,
Thank you, Christina.
thank you.
And
Thank you.
I'll be in touch.